The Buffalo Bills are one of the few teams in the National Football League that every year are in the mix. But like a lot of those teams, they're still looking to capture their first Super Bowl in this era, and particularly for the Bills, or specifically for them, their first ever World Championship. Can they get it done this year? That will be the question that we will answer here today. Welcome back, everybody, to 32 on 32 here on Chase's Sports News, where we preview every single NFL team season with a team reporter. Today, we preview the Buffalo Bills' upcoming season with a very special guest, a reporter for Syracuse.com. He covers the Bills on Shout, the Buffalo Bills podcast. He does so much covering this Buffalo team, Matt Perino. Matt, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining me.
Oh, thanks for having me, Chase. Pumped to, man, we're here. I can't believe we're just about 5 days away here. We kicked this thing off with a pretty good heavyweight fight between the Bills and Ravens.
So I got to let you know, just a quick disclaimer here for Bills fans watching this, and for you, Matt. I am a diehard Baltimore Ravens fan. So as
Nice.
much as I have been following the Buffalo Bills and stuff, they will not be the team that I'll be cheering for. They will not have my alliances with them on Sunday. But either way, I'm very, very excited to break this down. I think there's so much to talk about when it comes to Buffalo, and I think a lot of that has started with Hard Knocks. You know, they've been featured on Hard Knocks inside of their training camp, and so I feel like everyone has had an inside look as to what's been going on, but what hasn't been kind of shown from Bills training camp that has stood out to you and their preseason action as well?
For me, like the first thing that comes to mind when I think about this season's Bills team is Keon Coleman, because this is a player that from the draft process all the way into his rookie season with the Bills, he's just been very polarizing. He's somebody that, if you look at some of the advanced analytics from a separation ability, route running ability, there's been question marks. And even last season, as he kind of started to ascend a little bit before an injury, kind of knocked him back a couple pegs, it wasn't ever consistently great. Well, I will say over the course of the summer, he has been consistently great. And it's actually unbelievable to me that he hasn't been on Hard Knocks because of how consistently good he's been in the training camp battles, one-on-ones, in the team drills. Now, the Bills do have some editorial control, so I'm wondering if there's some people that they're trying to keep off of the radar of the league, perhaps. But I think Coleman in this offense and how this offense can evolve, that so much of its identity for years was really around Stefon Diggs as being the guy that unlocked Josh Allen back in 2020 when the Bills traded for him. And they've had to pivot over the last couple of years. And not only did they have to pivot from a star player, they had to pivot from an ideology that was kind of set by Brian Dable, the offensive coordinator who's now with the Giants. Ken Dorsey took over for him, was his offensive or quarterbacks coach for a couple of years. They went to Joe Brady when they fired Ken Dorsey, and he kind of comes from a completely different tree. So he's kind of kept some of that, remade this offense. They're very run focused. They're really good on their offensive line. And to me, they've made some changes on defense, but it's always going to be about Josh Allen, what this offense can do consistently. They were the second ranked scoring offense in the league last year. They hope to be that again, or maybe even better in 2025. And they may have to be that despite what they're hoping for are upgrades on the defensive side.
Yeah, it's very interesting with Hard Knocks. You know, who they also have been showing. KJ Hamler's been a star for a lot of it, of Hard Knocks, and he's not even on this roster. So I think it's very fascinating just how everything does work with Hard Knocks, what they are showing. But yeah, I'm sure there's some things they're trying to keep private as well. And this is a team that has championship aspirations, and a few guys maybe they're trying to keep in their back pocket. I mean, for Buffalo, last season was a similar story to the year before and the year before that. And it's kind of been, as a Baltimore Ravens fan, it feels like a very similar vibe where, they were a dominant team on both ends. Josh Allen worked miracles. He was the league MVP, historic season, all of that. But guess what? Here comes Kansas City with a fourth loss to the Chiefs in the past 5 years in the postseason. How come last year, after overcoming Baltimore and beating the one seed in the regular season, having this historic run from Josh Allen, how come last year wasn't the year for Buffalo?
Well, I think in the biggest games, you need your biggest players. And I think the Bills gave a pretty good sizable contract to Christian Benford, their number one cornerback this offseason, for a reason. When he left that game against Kansas City, the whole complexion of that game changed. And that was even considering the fact that offensively Kansas City was moving the ball and scoring early in that game. It just felt like the Bills didn't have a lot of answers on the outside. They went out and they kind of reshaped that room quite a bit. They brought in a couple of veterans that they've had in the past, and Tre'Davious White, who was with Baltimore last year for a stretch. Actually, going back and watching that Bills-Ravens game, he was a lot better in that game than even I remembered. Got flagged for that defensive pass interference against Coleman, which looking back at it wasn't pass interference. So that was kind of a tough pill to swallow. But they brought in Dane Jackson, who started a couple games for them in his previous run with the team, spent a year in Carolina. They drafted Maxwell Hairston. Well, you won't see Hairston in the opener because he suffered a knee injury during training camp, and he'll probably be out until at least week 5. He's on injury reserve to start the season. So they're hoping White, who sustained a lower body injury a little over a week ago at the end of training camp, is good to go for the opener. If not, it'll be Jackson, it'll be Ingram. But to me, this is the storyline of why the Bills haven't gotten over the hump over the course of the last 4 or 5 years. It's just been their inability to stop the opposing team's quarterback enough. And, I saw a crazy stat where I think it was like 13 possessions for the Eagles in the Super Bowl and or for the Chiefs in the Super Bowl, and the Eagles forced 9 punts. Well, in the last 4 playoff games against the Chiefs, the Bills combined have forced 6 punts. So just to kind of show you how their defense has just not gotten the job done. And that's something that I think really rests with Sean McDermott. This is Bobby Babbich's defense at this point, but he is a disciple of McDermott. He's been with him since 2017 in different roles, promoted to the defensive coordinator spot last year. That group has to be better, and it starts up front, and they reshaped it. They brought in 6 new players, 3 in the draft, 3 in free agency, led by Joey Bosa. How much does he have left? Well, we'll get to answer that question if he can stay healthy long enough to showcase what at one time was one of the best pass rush arsenals in the NFL. I'm really excited about this rookie class on the interior. TJ Sanders, Deion Walker, both of them had outstanding preseasons, and no better test to start the season than against Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson in this high-powered Ravens offense.
It's going to be so exciting. I mean, all the storylines, all the anticipation for that opening night game. And what I find so fascinating about it is the Ravens going back to Buffalo where they were eliminated last year, but the Bills are hungry too. It's not like the Ravens are the only ones that are hungry and hunting. The Bills are right there as well. So I'm so excited for what that matchup's going to have in store. Some of the best players in the NFL there. And I'm also, obviously the Bills did move on, but it felt like Baltimore maybe shot themselves in the foot in that game, and maybe it was less about Buffalo because I think Jackson made a lot of, errors himself, maybe not forced by the defense. Same goes for Mark Andrews. Maybe the story's a little bit different if the Ravens don't make those mental errors and all of a sudden they're moving on and the storyline is, Lamar torched this Bills defense, and then you see what they've done in previous years. You can't always put the blame on a quarterback if the team does not win. And that's what I'm always saying with the Ravens with Lamar Jackson, because the defense for Baltimore has forced 1 turnover for him in the playoffs. And as you're saying with Buffalo, they haven't done a great job limiting Patrick Mahomes in Kansas City in those matchups either. You talk about that game in 2021 where the Bills had the lead with 13 seconds to go. So you can look at that, the history, and the defense is so important to possibly winning in the postseason. It is a team sport. It's not an individual sport. But when you have one of the best individuals in the game, your odds sure to improve. Because let's talk about Josh Allen for a minute. He was the league's MVP for good reason last year. It was a historic season. He limited the turnovers that used to be so costly, beat both number 1 seeds. And there was about a month where he was one of, if not the most dominant quarterback we've ever seen touch a football field. Just maybe touch on how special he's been. And I know I hate to get into these debates, but maybe where you'd rank him among the league's best quarterbacks, as that always seems to be a popular debate these days.
So I think what really makes him special and kind of in his own, I think Patrick Mahomes is in his own tier because of the playoff success. But if you're talking about that group that's kind of cobbled together with, Lamar, Joe Burrow, Josh Allen, and you can maybe throw another 1 or 2 in there, maybe Matthew Stafford, maybe if you want to throw him in there. It's the playoff success, the consistent playoff production that Josh Allen has had in his career. I mean, if you look at the all-time numbers, first of all, Patrick Mahomes is on an insane trajectory to probably blow up every record that's ever been established.
Right.
But Josh Allen is, if there was no Patrick Mahomes, I think people would be talking about him in this era almost similarly of how they talked about Peyton Manning in his era, right? Like year after year trying to get over the hump. And there were a lot of losses to Tom Brady in his career, but he was consistently putting up the numbers, especially in the playoffs. I mean, no better metric for or sample size for Josh Allen's game than going back against that the divisional rivalry game in the divisional round or wild card round. I think it was in 2021 when it was a perfect game. The Bills didn't punt. Josh Allen had 5 touchdowns. It was just one of the most unbelievable performances against the Bill Belichick defense. So much so that Bill actually went across the hallway to the Bills locker room just to find Josh after the game and say, "Damn, like that was pretty special stuff." And he's had those moments in the playoffs, and it's felt like for the most part, he's done what's been necessary in a lot of these big time games, going back to 13 seconds to advance. And it's been other factors in the game that have kind of contributed to why they haven't. Even going back to the Kansas City game last year, I mean, they ran the ball pretty well. I thought that, Josh played a really good game, and it just in the end wasn't enough to push the Bills over the hump because Patrick Mahomes on the other side played just as well, and they were just as effective in the run game as the Bills were. The thing that's interesting about the Bills this year is, they gave a pretty good contract to James Cook, and I thought in the Chiefs game last year, he kind of had a coming out party as a real superstar. I mean, he goes for 2 touchdowns, and if you remember, the one of them was on a 4th and 1 play. Looks was going to be like a 3-yard loss, and he ends up fighting through 2 or 3 tacklers to get the ball over the goal line for a touchdown. And he has been so important to this iteration of this offense under Joe Brady, what he brings in the run game and the passing game and how he's evolved as a runner in between the tackles. They like, obviously I mentioned Coleman. They like that they've brought in Josh Palmer, who they think can be featured a little bit more in this offense than he was in LA. But it's also about Dalton Kincaid, who they drafted in the first round a couple of years ago to be a primary weapon on this team. Had a little bit of a setback last year with the injury,
Yep.
didn't put the same numbers, but they're hoping that he's going to be a big impact player for Josh Allen.
For sure. It's just a matter of whether this receiving core has enough. You mentioned you like Keon Coleman. Do you think there is enough there? Because, Allen had so much success, but is that sustainable if there's not a great amount of talent around him? So do you think there is enough in that receiving core for Allen to, again, thrive and offense to run smoothly?
Yes, only because I think that they upgraded. You think about Mac Hollins last year in his role, and he had a career year with the Bills and went on to sign with the Patriots. But I don't think anybody was talking about how good that guy was when the season started last year. That was surprising in a lot of ways, I think nationally as well. They traded for Amari Cooper, and I think a lot of people were excited about that move. But honestly, that didn't look like the Amari Cooper that the Bills thought that they were trading for the most part. He had a couple of good moments. And they think Palmer in his prime gives them a similar skill set, not the level to which Amari Cooper has been really good in this league early in his career, but maybe a better version of last year's Amari Cooper in this offense. They like Elijah Moore as well. They're still hopeful that Curtis Samuel can stay healthy enough to be a factor in this offense. So there's all these parts on the outside. And, they bring back, interestingly enough, today, they re-signed Gabe Davis, their former 4th round pick, who had a bad year in Jacksonville. They're bringing him back to the practice squad. It's going to be a very slow go for him coming off a serious knee injury. I wouldn't expect him to even be ready to play for probably a month or two once he gets back in the building, gets the strength back up in the leg. But if you're talking about a proven playoff performer, if you can bring him into the mix, if there's an injury late in the season, that's not a bad option to have. So I do like the weapons. And I didn't even mention who I think is sneaky the most important piece of this entire passing game, and that is slot wizard Khalil Shakir, who was 2nd in the league behind only Jamar Chase in run after the catch yards last season. He is such a safety blanket for Josh Allen at all 3 levels of the field. He's a sneaky route runner. He's a really, really good player.
Yeah, it's just a matter of if he can emerge as that number 1 receiver, but I think he has all the talent. He's quick and speedy. You mentioned the yards after the catch. It's fascinating. And it's funny how Gabe Davis is back in Buffalo. I feel like we've seen a common trend here the past few years. A lot of players, I feel like in the National Football League, are with a team, then leave for a few years, and then come back. I feel like it's been a recent trend we've seen in the NFL, but for sure, if you can get Gabe Davis back into the mix, he had such a great connection with Josh Allen, particularly in that game. How dare I say the 13 seconds against Kansas City, because he was tremendous in that game. That's kind of the game that put him on the map. And then he was solid for them for a few seasons. So if he can again be a useful tool for them come postseason time, that could be huge. there are some other areas of this offense I think we need to touch on. James Cook is now extended. Real quick before we break down some other areas, just kind of quick rapid fire. What are your thoughts on James Cook heading into 2025?
I think he's got to, shoulder a little bit more of the load. I mean, he was only on the field 48% of the snaps last season. At times, I don't think that they fully trusted him in pass protection to be on the field on third downs. And, it's a double-edged sword because on one hand, we talk about maybe not trusting him or maybe having a better option in Ty Johnson, who is an elite level third down running back. He's great in the passing game. He runs, his yards per rush average is great for what his usage is. And he can block. Like, he's one of the better running back blockers in the NFL. And it's such a key piece to what they do. When he's in the game, there's so many, Joe Brady's playbook completely opens up because of the motion stuff that they can do, the play action stuff, the formation, creativity options that are there for him. So it's hard when you have a lot of players that you like. Oh, and they spent a 4th round pick on Ray Davis last year, and he had a really strong rookie season too. So a lot of mouths to feed, but I do think you sign that contract, you're going to be guaranteed $30 million over the next 3 years. You're James Cook. You got to be out there and you got to deliver when you're out there a little bit more. And that's saying a lot because he was really good last year. I mean, it's 16 rushing touchdowns, tied for the league lead. I just think there's another level that he could reach.
For sure. And I'm excited to see what he can do. He's so versatile. You can use him as a pass catching running back. You can use him kind of down toward the goal line. He can get the touchdowns when you need to, kind of in the short yardage situations. So yeah, it seems like a really solid weapon. And then of course you have to talk about the offensive line. A lot of this is obviously Josh Allen and him being a very smart player and getting the ball away and having the speed, to scramble out of bad situations. But no team in the NFL allowed less sacks than Buffalo last year. And the offensive line was an instrumental part of that. Do you believe that they'll remain one of the league's best and kind of in that elite stature this coming year? Or do you believe they'll have some setbacks?
I do. The you can't predict for injury, right? Like, they've been so healthy over the last 2 seasons, but what the key ingredient for me is they have an elite tackle combination in Deion Dawkins and Spencer Brown. And I think Spencer Brown, as good as he played last season, like, I think he could be an all-pro this year. I mean, that's what, some of the people that really study offensive line play around the league that I've talked to over the course of the offseason, there is huge expectations for Brown. I think now in his 5th season. This was a 3rd round draft pick who went to a very small school in North Dakota State, was kind of under the radar, came into the league, had some back problems early on. And, since he really took off in his 3rd season, he's been one of the under the radar elite players at his position, one of the top right tackles in the league. And when you're talking about a tough quarterback to bring down already in Josh Allen, now you're talking about 2 bookends that make it almost impossible for marquee edge rushers to impact the game consistently over the course of 4 quarters. You got something working here. And on the interior, Connor McGovern has been everything they could have dreamed of when they signed him as a free agent a couple of years ago. They moved him over to center to replace Mitch Morse. The big thing for me is, can Osiris Torrance, their right guard, 2nd rounder out of Florida a couple of years ago, he's extension eligible this next offseason coming up. Can he have the kind of season that can elevate him into another tier, which I think then in part will raise the stature of this offensive line even more, and maybe even into the conversation of the Philadelphia Eagles of the world, where I think they're not super far off. They're not there yet. I think Torrance's development can go a long way to getting them there.
For sure. I think that there's a lot to be excited about with the Buffalo Bills offensive line. And I think overall the group, you have Josh Allen and just one star. When you have a star like him who could go down as one of the greatest players to ever play the game, you have a good offensive line around him, a decent receiving core, a solid running back. That's going to be good enough for them to be one of the best offenses in the league. Again, assuming most of the pieces stay healthy. Now there's the conversation of defense. And you mentioned how maybe the Bills defense hasn't been at the level that fans would want come postseason time. But overall, they have been one of the better units in the league during the regular season. And I think they return a pretty solid group. Are they ready to take that next leap and become elite come postseason time?
It's all on the defensive line. Like, that is, to me, what has held this group back in the playoffs. And listen, they got a lot of good pieces. Like Ed Oliver, I think he gets a little bit too much hate at times. I think he's been a really consistent playmaker. He didn't have the explosive statistical season a year ago that he had in 2023, but he's still a really high level defensive tackle. And what they've done is they have surrounded him with size and athleticism. And to me, that was always should have been the marching orders for Brandon Beane that I just feel like took them a little while to fully embrace it. I mean, they go out and they draft TJ Sanders. He is almost going to be like, if you think about the rotation, right? Ed Oliver plays 70% of the snaps, somewhere around that. The reason they do that is because they like to keep their guys fresh. I think you can bring that down to 60% now with Sanders in the mix. Larry Ogunjobi is going to be suspended for the first 6 games because of a PED test. When he gets back, he is another cog in that wheel that they're going to turn on the interior. And that's where Sean McDermott believes you can affect the quarterback best. Rushing from the interior, getting consistent pressure. They still have Daquan Jones, Deion Walker at 6'6", 350 out of Kentucky. They believed he was a first-round caliber player with his 2023 tape. Wasn't as good in 2024. Dealt with a back injury. He's been an absolute beast all summer long. If he has the kind of impact I think he can have early in the season, you mentioned that you're a Ravens fan. I think of a guy like Travis Jones at his size that just really makes things difficult for the other team in the pass and the run game. Walker can maybe be a version of that, even at like 20% of the snaps early on. I'll be interested to see how they utilize him. And then on the outside, Rousseau, Joey Bosa, AJ Epinesa. It's the same cast of characters with now Bosa in the mix. And the other big difference from the beginning of last season, and maybe last season as a whole, Matt Milano is healthy. Okay. He has not been injured this entire summer. He's now fully removed from the last injury, which was the torn bicep. He's fully healthy off of the ACL. So I think, the broken leg. I think Matt Milano is the key piece for the totality of this defense because of what he does as a spy in the passing game and how good he is against the run. They call Terrell Bernard the quarterback of the defense, but I think Matt Milano is kind of the heartbeat of the defense. And so if he could stay healthy, play it close to the level he was at pre-injury in 2023, I think this defense returns to kind of what you were talking about.
For sure. And I mean, again, we're going to keep making the Ravens Bills because those games last year were doing the most important in terms of playoff seeding and what happened. And of course, come postseason time, and they're going to play again in week 1. But that first Ravens, Derrick Henry went off nearly 200 yards rushing. And if I'm correct, Milano wasn't playing that game. And so they implement him for the playoff game, and the result occurred. And Derrick Henry was, I don't want to call sitting shut down, but he was not the player he was in that opening game against Buffalo. So we're going to have to see what happens. And I think having Milano healthy will definitely help this team. It's a conversation I think you have with Cincinnati. It's a conversation you have with Baltimore and a lot of these teams that are there but can't get over the hump. And it's the head coaching spot. And I think Sean McDermott, especially now kind of seeing more of what he does and watching Hard Knocks and analyzing the way that he coaches his team, I think is a really great coach. But like we have the conversation with Zach Taylor and like we have the conversation with John Harbaugh, he's yet to capture a Super Bowl while rostering one of the league's most talented players ever, you could argue. If the Bills fall short again, is there a conversation to be had about Sean McDermott, as crazy as that sounds?
It's not crazy. I mean, the hard part about it is he's been so consistently successful. I mean, he has got a better winning percentage career-wise than Marv Levy does. And he was, the GOAT of this organization, going to 4 straight Super Bowls. And that to me is the big difference, right? Like Sean hasn't broken through and gotten to the big game. And, it's funny, like that seems to be the measuring stick a lot of fans use. But I will tell you, there will be no solace in getting to the game and losing that game either. Okay. It's going to be the same feeling as you had if you lose in the AFC title game. To me, it's about getting there and winning it. I think the Bills are set up. See, the problem with the idea of moving on from McDermott, the regime being, is that you have to trust ownership to be able to tab the right people to replace them. And I think that's a crapshoot. Like everybody would have sold their soul for, Ben Johnson, right? That's the common name that I hear. What happens if we go through this Chicago Bears season with all that talent, all that first round talent accumulated, and they go under 500 in year 1 with Ben Johnson? It's not a guarantee, and everything looks good right now. I mean, it looks like that program is turning around. It looks like he's got the locker room. But we were in the same spot with Mike McDaniel a couple of years ago, and the train came off the tracks really quick there in Miami. So it's one thing to say you want a different vision, and I understand that. But I think if you have Josh Allen and you have the culture that's been built here with McDermott and Beane, and you continually find guys in the draft, is Beane have a perfect draft record? Absolutely not. But he has found a lot of gems. He found the quarterback. He has supplemented that with some really good high-level picks. He's missed a couple high-level picks as well. I mean, the Kyer Elam pick was an absolute bust. You're going to have those, though. any GM that does the job for long enough, you're going to have misses. It's it's a people business. You have to evaluate people, talent, how they're going to handle the pressure, all the little things that go along into it. I'm not sitting here trying to be an apologist for this regime, but the success that this 9-year run or 8-year run has seen on the heels of a 17-year playoff drought with a bunch of just absolute clowns running the show, you could do a lot worse than what McDermott and Bean have been. So unless it's just unmitigated disaster, I don't think there's any result this season that would happen that would force Terry Pegula to move on from him. And that's the thing. Bean doesn't have the control to fire McDermott, and they both report to Sean or to Terry Pegula. So it's going to be challenging how this thing moves past either of these two, unless Terry gets to a point where he's unhappy. And right now, that's not the feel I have for it.
No, for sure. And I mean, it's also the conversation of the grass isn't always greener on the other side. And like when you look at the consistent success he's had, this is a franchise that, the 4 straight Super Bowls with Jim Kelly. But outside of that, this hasn't been an incredible franchise. And so what Sean McDermott has done with this team, and when you have a quarterback like Josh Allen, and if he likes Sean McDermott as head coach, you have to take those things into account as well. And, they're going to hope this conversation isn't even relevant. They're going to hope they get to a Super Bowl championship and win it. But yeah, I mean, I think McDermott is certainly not in the hot seat. It does become a conversation if you lose in the postseason, but that's what makes these conversations, I think, really fun and really entertaining.
Without a doubt. And listen, all year long, if you listen to local talk radio, I mean, this conversation is playing out week in and week out. I mean, there is definitely a section of the fan base that is fatigued with McDermott, have issues with him going back to 13 seconds. It seems like there are moments that, when the lights shine the brightest, maybe the decision-making isn't where you'd want it to be. But I also believe in, building up playoff scars eventually lead you to where you want to go. And I think he's been in so many big moments and has so much experience to kind of tap into at this point. Everybody talks about Andy Reid and the sustained success he had. Well, he got to figure things out in a decade plus run in Philadelphia before that. So in a perfect world, you'd have whoever's out there right now that's going to end up being this generation version of Andy Reid, but good luck finding that and picking it and projecting that. It's a really hard business to be in.
For sure. And I'm excited to see what does go on and what that conversation does become if the Bills do again fall short. But we do this with every team. Let's take a quick look here at the schedule, switch the layout there. I have a projection for Buffalo. I do this with every team. I have them at 13-4. Look, it's one of the easier schedules in the NFL, particularly for a team that was a first-place team. But I also do want to bring up, yes, you have a lot of easy games on there. But if New England is improved and Tua stays healthy, the AFC East is not as easy as some may expect. And you do have some of the really tough games on there, the Baltimores, the Kansas Cities, the Philadelphias. So it's an easier schedule, but also some games where the Bills could fall short. Overall, what are your thoughts on the schedule? Does 13-4 and another AFC East crown sound about right?
Yeah, I have them at 13 wins as well. And I think that there are a couple of games that can trip them up. I think this first one out of the gates, you have them winning this game. It's going to be a challenge. You got a very motivated Ravens team coming in here to prove that what happened in the playoffs last year wasn't an indication of who they are. It's also interesting to me the way that you kind of laid all of this out. You got the Bills winning 3 of their big 4 games, the only loss being to the Chiefs, which I think if that happens, I think we could be talking 13, 14 wins and maybe the 1 seed in the AFC. So I like where your head's at. I'm right in line with you. I think the division is tougher than it has been in years past. I don't know if I have them losing 3 games in the division, but I do think that, the Patriots are better. They lost 1 to them last year. I think the Dolphins are still, you have to respect them because of the talent they have, especially on the offensive side. And then the Jets, if they get even average level quarterback play, their defense is so strong. So yeah, I think that you're right in the neighborhood of what I'm thinking.
And by the way, just this is on my end with the error. That Week 18 win is supposed to be, or that Week 18 game is supposed to be a win for Buffalo. So a 4-2 record, a 4-2 record in the division. I think. Yeah, I mean, to me, I think it's the Bills' number 1 seed to lose. And I know that sounds crazy, but when you have a much easier schedule, I mean, Kansas City's first 9 weeks is a gauntlet. Baltimore's first 6 weeks before the bye is a gauntlet. And so if the Chiefs and the Ravens get tripped up kind of to begin the season, Buffalo is going to be possibly in control of their own destiny. destiny for the number one seed the entire year. And I think that's something to keep an eye on as well. You got an early bye, a tough matchup, maybe against Tampa Bay as well. Some games you want to circle. Overall, I think it's going to be very interesting. Josh Allen, you get to play Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow. You play the reigning Super Bowl champion. So a lot of games you want to mark on your calendar. And I'm really excited to see what does go on here for Buffalo. Matt, this has been awesome. I don't want to waste too much of your time. One last question for you. What's happening this season? I mean, Bills fans want to hear two words, and that's Super Bowl. Is that going to happen this year? Is that going to come to fruition?
Ooh, you
Or
asked
Bills
me the
fans
big
gonna have to
question
wait?
here. I really felt with the way that things were trending last season that it felt like they had what it took to get to a Super Bowl and to perhaps compete for a Super Bowl. Looking back at that game last year, I don't know if anybody was beating that Eagles team, and we'll see what's going on with them this season. But I just think that a lot of things are at play this year. I mean, the Bills are going to play their last season in Highmark Stadium before they open their brand new stadium next season. There is a lot of, you talk about Gabriel Davis, you talk about Jordan Poyer and Dane Jackson and Jordan Phillips, guys that have been here, a part of the glory days of this iteration of the team. They're back on the practice squad just to, pull up a seat on the ride of what is Josh Allen in his prime and what should be a really good Super Bowl contender of a team. And so, yeah, I'm going to probably stay there year after year as Josh Allen continues to play the way that he does, and they continue to kind of rebuild this thing outside of an injury. I think they're going to be there in the end. I still think that if you're talking about playoff success, they've been the team in the AFC that's had the most of it, that's not named the Kansas City Chiefs. So they're going to be a tough out. They got to get that one seed. I keep thinking about what it would be like that last game in Highmark Stadium if it's an AFC title game.
Right.
That place is on its last legs. Like, it feels like one big eruption could take it all down. They won't even need to bulldoze it. If they just have the AFC title game there, I think it would be such bedlam that place might come crashing down. But it's going to be a great season. It's going to be a historic and memorable season. And hey, man, I covered Josh Allen in his prime for my job. So it's pretty cool stuff.
No, for sure. I mean, it's moments that one day when you are 80 years old, you're going to say, you don't understand how good Josh Allen was to the younger generation. So, look, I think us NFL fans maybe we overappreciate the era of quarterbacks and the era of offenses that we have at our fingertips. And I think we're going to have a lot of fun watching all of them this coming season, including the Buffalo Bills. Everybody, thank you guys for tuning in. Matt, thank you so much for joining us here today. For the audience, the links to all of Matt's work is going to be in the description below. If you're a Bills fan, you want to follow his work throughout the remainder of the season. Matt Perino, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, buddy.
Awesome. We're going to wrap this one up here alongside Matt Perino covering the Buffalo Bills. I'm your host, Chase Coburn, saying so long. A few more teams to cover right here on 32 on 32 before we kickstart the NFL season. Signing off, I am your host, Chase Coburn.